bring down the rates of homicide and violent crime. They've done evidence studies with the Princeton University, had this global consciousness project where they put random number generators around the world and found that the patterns of randomness went into patterns of coherence when there were massive global focusing events, such as 9/11 or the O.J. Simpson verdict, which suggests that somehow consciousness is there's some kind of, the Teilhard de Chardin, who was a Catholic mystic and theorist, talked about the noosphere. This idea there's like a mind sphere. Nous is from the Greek word for mind. There's somehow a thought envelope or a mind sphere around the planet. And as we're moving, into this next phase, that noosphere is becoming more and more available and more activated.
Okay, which brings us to our exhibition, Psychedelic, and basically you wrote a wonderful essay for our book informed by all the research you've done in your other books. And I'm going to ask you now the question I asked you before you wrote your essay, and now that you've actually seen some of the artworks in person, why at this point in time does there seem to be such a flourishing of this psychedelic sensibility in the work of artists? What do you make of that?
I don't know.
You don't know? Come on, you wrote about it.
I mean, I think that,
well, let's, for example, talk about the idea. I mean, you were just talking about some aspects of the collective consciousness, for example, or a shared consciousness. How, right. I mean, does that have something to do with it?
I think there's a larger kind of somewhat cautious but steady psychedelic resurgence kind of happening now. I don't know, did anybody look at the New York Times yesterday? There was a front page article about
medical
research into psychedelics. They're actually they referred to them in the piece as existential medicines, which I thought was very interesting. There's a group called MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Approach to Psychedelic Studies, which has been funding and supporting a lot of different research initiatives. And there's other groups also. So there was a Johns Hopkins study where they gave psilocybin to a number of people who'd never had a psychedelic experience before. They also did placebo, double-blind type studies, and the vast majority of people to whom they gave the psilocybin reported it as an extremely positive experience, even a transformative one, even a spiritually enriching one. But they're also doing studies with psilocybin being given to terminally ill cancer patients to see if it affects their kind of understanding of the dying process. And another study they're funding is using MDMA, which the street name is ecstasy, using that in a therapy program with veterans from the Iraq War to treat the Afghanistan War, to treat post-traumatic stress disorder, which I think is a very interesting and powerful idea. MDMA originally was a therapy tool that was used in a lot of relationship counseling work and traumatic counseling work, and it causes a kind of influx of serotonin to the brain that seems to allow people to, in a kind of happier and more euphoric state, process difficult psychological material and painful psychological material. So I think that's very powerful. I personally kind of think that the psychedelic kind of experience has been extremely influential, but kind of secretly influential in a huge number of different fields, since the 60s. This author, Tom Frank, wrote a book about the culture of cool, how psychedelic tropes were co-opted by advertising. A lot of the pioneers of the internet and the personal computer were exploring psychedelics. Like people like Steve Jobs have talked about it being a very important experience for them. And I think, through psychedelics, a lot of people get this, a first type of experience of interconnectedness. The sense that the separation is somehow an illusion. And then if you look at the, tools of the internet that allow people to mesh together, I mean, it almost seems like a, we're re-engineering that effect through our technologies. Biology was also a field where people have been inspired by psychedelics. Carrie Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize in the early 70s for developing polymer chain reactions. He also has been very outspoken about the value of psychedelic experience for his understanding of this molecular reality and so on. So yeah, and then in terms of culture, I think it's been there since the 60s, and not always in the works, the people can be affected by the psychedelic kind of ambience without themselves having taken psychedelics. I don't think Andy Warhol ever took it, yet there's something in his kind of super saturated Dayglow work which kind of references an aspect of the psychedelic experience. Tom Wolfe wrote the electric Kool-Aid acid test, never took LSD, but he still tried to kind of find a way to, mimic how he kind of imagined the experience in his prose.
And for those who are seeing our exhibition for the first time, this is what this exhibition, in a sense, is attempting to do, is to document the evolution and now current flourishing of a certain kind of sensibility that we define as a psychedelic sensibility that, of course, was very present in our culture through psychedelic posters and record album covers and the head shops and all of that in fact, were very common in the late 60s, and then by the mid-70s you didn't see them as much anymore. But so this sensibility sort of erupted sporadically in contemporary art of the 80s and 90s, and now in this current decade we just see so much of it, and that's what we're looking at. So any other responses to the art that you've seen that you want to mention?
Yeah, you're kind of, you seem to be, one focus is op art, which for me is only maybe a tangential reference. I guess Alex Gray has become kind of like the standard bearer for, trying to really, encapsulate aspects of the psychedelic experience directly in art form. But, you get a lot of different types of visionary experience through psychedelics. So it's also very hard to fully, define, where that ends off, in terms of what art or music is really reflecting that consciousness, and what isn't, Yeah.
Okay, and then just one other thing that I've noticed in having the artwork here is to have, you've talked about energy a lot in your discussion, and I've certainly noticed in, whether it's the abstract or the figurative work here, there's this intense energy, the color and the light that really comes to the viewer. And so two things that I'm left with, since the show